Films often have a way of grabbing me in many certain ways, regardless of what hidden arsenal lies within the product. Whether if it's emotional or literal, its attempt to define itself within its genre is essential when laying down the foundation to offer some sort of substance that will blow my mind as I continue to gaze into my TV screen. Getting invested with characters, background lore, appreciating its vision, etc. is something that I've come to appreciate with the film I'm about to get into today. It's a good break too, especially when recently in both the movies and video game departments, action and brutality were part of what I was experiencing. Does that mean there's no substance to be found within them? Not necessarily. In that film's case, being backed up by attachment to the character and lore helped me, care about what I was consuming. Same goes for the video game, as its experience had led me to appreciate a satisfying story through the eyes of a character I've grown attached to recently. Maybe I'll dedicate more time to Mr. Wick and Captain Blazkowicz in the future, but for the time being, as we are diving into Your Name today, I'm gonna stash those ideas away for now, and begin by breaking down what ties this film together as the threads of its world hold on for dear life. Now, before I get into the actual characters and story of the film, I wanted to take a look at the insistence this film has in dividing things into near-perfect halves, as it takes advantage of its locales the film takes place in. As a wise old Jedi Master on Dagobah once said, this time we'll ignore the master and apprentice thing, always two there are, no more, no less. The city of Tokyo and the town of Itamori. Those who may have seen the poster prior to seeing the film, if they look close enough, notice the environment being cut down the middle, technically sawing the poster in half to advertise these two distinct locations. Between a technologically expansive city looking to advance an agenda of progress, and a restricted minimalist town ultimately held back by its limited ability and desire to expand as old traditions die hard. Both of these locales help to sell each world as we switch between both characters' lives, mind, and body. But we're not done with this film's greatness of pulling off these locales. Besides the distinctive look between these two locales, the lighting aided by both its environments helped distinguish the set pieces. Despite the construction of Tokyo in this film being a sight to behold, my personal favorite examples of lighting from this film stem from Itamori's side. The sunlight beaming past Itamori's forested areas helps me get immersed into an isolated journey, with a unique experience shared amongst 3 individuals, a big contrast to having many eyes watching you in the streets of Tokyo as you carry on with the norm. However, between Tokyo and Itamori, I'm admittedly a sucker for the bright orange sunsets and the dark blue skies, and in that same sky, that contains the object that lights up this film's central story, the meteor. Without the obstruction of Tokyo's bright citywide lights, Itamori's residents have a rather cursed blessing to have the clearest viewing of its bright blue and purple tail as it takes flight across a visibly starry sky. However, as it comes into close proximity with Earth, it's a reminder that these two different landscapes, despite the distance that splits them apart, they share a connection in the same world and country, while also letting me know that despite putting all my focus into these two places, there's more to think about in this world rather than just Itamori and Tokyo alone. So with that being said, let's now close the door on the discussion of this film's environment for now, and speed things along as we get into the actual characters themselves. Throughout the narrative, we're drawn to focus on the 2 main characters, while acknowledging the presence of other characters as they too help bolster the experience. Taki Tachibana, a Tokyo high school student with Nathan Drake levels of sketching who works as a waiter in an Italian restaurant as he lives with his father in an apartment. Mitsuha Miyamizu, also in high school but resides in the small town of Itamori, dealing with a life she despises as she's destined by her family traditions to carry an unwanted burden to one day run the shrine that her grandmother took over a long time ago. I'm probably beating this word into the ground, but besides their genders, their personalities, and how they operate their day-to-day lives, it's what makes them distinct. Now, here's where things get a little more interesting. They're used to a system that works in their own bodies, but when swapping each other's lives on a Freaky Friday, they're forced to adapt to each other's lifestyles when confronted with, each other. With attempts of working together to ensure each other's lives are left unscathed seem fruitless. It's hilarious yet intriguing to watch as they stumble in each other's places, though I am unsure if they would have done some certain actions throughout the film had they been in their own body instead. Being in each other's shoes helped them get to know not only their lifestyles, rather intimately might I add, but the lifestyle of their respective places they lived in, having a different reaction to the elements of each other's lives, whether if it's the change of locale or the friends and family around them expressing their reactions from their sudden change in character. They both struggle being in each other's shoes, trying to preserve the original integrity of each other's lives. In addition, Taki and Mitsuha show different ways of resenting one another from breaking each other's boundaries they set for one another. Mitsuha's focus of her rules she set for Taki more so focused on her body and body language, whereas Taki's version of preventing Mitsuha from sabotaging his life comes from strict management of time and money. Besides the drastic difference in action that the people in their world notice firsthand, before said actions are noticed, as a viewer, I have the luxury of being able to see them get adjusted to each other's bodies as they each start the day from where their previous days had ended, their own bedroom. I am immersed and sold with the idea as I not only witness the adjustment occur, but observe a change in tone of voice each time a switch occurs. From what I observed, in the English dub's case anyway, when Mitsuha's voice actress switches to Taki's persona, the pitch of their voice is slightly deeper, while Taki's actor with Mitsuha's delivers their lines more delicately, which also leads back to the characters themselves. How they say things is what makes them distinct, and all the more entertaining to watch. Mitsuha's outgoing desire to be free from strict tradition in her small town complements Taki's desire to stay in line with a traditional A to B path of building his life in the big city. Now, here's the funny thing. This whole journey, this dilemma that Mitsuha and Taki faced together all began, ended, and reformed thanks to Mitsuha's first meeting with Taki on that train, and the meteor that ultimately doomed Itomori's citizens in one timeline. Mitsuha's grandmother often spoke about this concept of reconnecting the thread, forming a union, in addition to claiming she's had experiences similar to Mitsuha switching with Taki when she was younger. Despite there being a bit of a supernatural aspect to this entire story, mixed in with a little bit of a religious belief, I also ask how and why neither character noticed a calendar from what date and year they are in. It's still quite beautiful. It seems that with history often at times, its reliance on proper documentation is required in order to fulfill a sort of legitimacy to give it the grounds it needs to be a reliable account of what happened. And before Taki was able to dedicate himself to the journey to find the sake Mitsuha made earlier on in the film, she was nothing more than just a name in a long list of deceased residents that once lived in Itomori after the comet struck 3 years prior. On that note, finding the town he lived a life in as Mitsuha was near impossible until he came across one man who happened to have lived there, thus showing how impactful the incident was and how little made it out. Thankfully, Taki's journey was a success, and that moment on the mountain, surrounded by shadow in the midst of twilight's hour, as the clouds formed a hazing orange, pink, yellow, and blue, that's something you won't get in a history book. As a matter of fact, it'd be dismissed as an absurd fantasy if such a story was attempted to be documented as official history. Regardless of whether or not each party meant to remember each other's name, Taki's decision to preserve a feeling, to tell her, "I love you," as opposed to letting himself become another artificially cataloged name written down, is very powerful to me. To change the course of history, to let all of Itomori's people live, she could find a reason to pursue something that would chime in her ears, until she and Taki could be reunited to finally understand what they've been trying to tell each other all this time. And that, to me, is what gives your name its sharp edge. In the end, as I, the viewer, tumble through a roller coaster of emotions, the only 3 people who knows what truly happened are Mitsuha, Taki, and you. All 3 of us have completely lost our minds as we accepted the fantasy that emerged right in front of us, surrendering to the tide's undertow that's pulling us away from the shores of quote-unquote reality, as our world got flipped upside down. But regardless of how that fantasy may make us doubt our original interpretations of the world's reality, or the fantasy itself, it's still a fantasy that makes me cheer for the characters. And as for the characters themselves, they carry out what they feel is right despite being unaware of where or who their motivations come from. To imagine what may become of them as the movie's title screen pops up one last time before I am left with the credits, my imagination as to what's next with Your Name's story, or rather Mitsuha and Taki's story, is one of optimism that replaces the dread that had been planted earlier when I first witnessed Itomori's destruction. So overall, what I got from Your Name is something I'm certain if I want to, come back to every time so I may experience the addicting, fun, and emotionally split journey reforming its threads every single time. The characters were great, I loved the lore, and I really loved the art direction and lighting. I am, however, gonna say on record that I could have hated this movie due to the magic alone that trumps reality. After all, sometimes magic works in some other stories, and some completely break it. But Your Name did a good job in handling that, and wrapped it up perfectly instead of dragging things on, because it knew how to end its story, and bring everything to a conclusion, unlike some stories out there stretching itself thin for sequels. And like some of my other favorite things, I would love to experience this movie again for the first time. In addition, this is the first Makoto Shinkai film I ever saw. I'd be more than happy to check out not only his future projects set to release in the near future, but also some of his previous works as well. And if you haven't already done so, I would highly recommend grabbing a copy of this film on Blu-ray, while maybe bringing along some popcorn, a friend, and some tissue while you're at it, and check it out. Well everybody, that's all for today. What'd you think of Your Name, and do you also have any thoughts regarding Shinkai's new project, Weathering with You? Regardless of what you have to say to me down in the comments below, thanks for taking the time to check out my thoughts on this film. Since this was my first review on a film, not just an anime film, I may need some improvements and adjustments to make in the future, but all steps lead to that future, and that's all I can really do. Anyway, as always, take care everybody, and I'll see you next time.